that would have put curbs on Fannie and Freddie. I was out there before this bubble burst saying this was a problem. I was in Scranton, Pennsylvania the other day, and I had one of a home builder who was the head of the association came up to me and said, Rick, I'm here to apologize. We came here to push you so you would oppose, putting caps on Fannie and Freddie. You were right. We were wrong. Time and time again, Wall Street, the Wall Street bailout. 5 of the 8 people on this panel supported the Wall Street bailout. I didn't. I know that we solve problems best from the bottom up, not the top down and government intervention in the market.
Governor Romney, you have 30 seconds to respond.
That's fine. I believe very deeply in the functioning of markets. The work I've done in healthcare, I actually worked as a consultant to the healthcare industry, to hospitals and various health institutions. I had the occasion of actually acquiring and trying to build healthcare businesses. I know something about it, and I believe markets work. And what's wrong with our healthcare system in America is that government is playing too heavy a role. We need to get our markets to work by having the consumer, the patient, have a stake in what the cost and quality is of healthcare, give them the transparency they need to know where the opportunities are for lower cost and better quality, to make sure that the providers offer them the broadest array of options that they could have. And once we have that happening, you'll see us. 18% of our GDP is spent on healthcare. Right. The next highest nation in the world is 12%. It's a huge difference. We have to get the market to work to make sure that we get the kind of quality and value that America deserves.
But, Governor, let me ask you about health care, because Congressman Paul said, put it back to the doctor and the patient. You said a few moments ago that you thought states should have the responsibility for insuring the uninsured. And, of course, in Massachusetts, you enacted an individual mandate and subsidies to have people who didn't have insurance get it. So you think there's a pretty large role for government in this area?
Well, I think that people have a responsibility to receive their own care. And the doctor-patient relationship is, of course, where that exists.
The responsibility to force them.
I didn't know whether Ron Paul was saying he's going to get rid of Medicaid. I would not get rid of Medicaid. It's a health program for the poor. What I said was I would take the Medicaid dollars that are currently spent by the federal government, return them to the states so that states can craft their own programs to care for their own poor, rather than having the federal government mandate a one-size-fits-all plan in the entire nation. Obamacare is wrong. I'll repeal it. I'll get it done.
John.
Congressman?
My plan of cutting the budget by $1 trillion does deal with Medicaid, and that is that it preserves it, and there is a transition period with a goal that eventually we would hope to move that back into the economy. But right now it would be too much to do it in 1 year. Finding $1 trillion was a job and a half, and getting rid of five departments. So yes, my budget takes into consideration health care for the elderly, health care on Medicaid, as well as child health care. At the same time, we deal with the bailouts, the banks, and all the benefits that they get from the financial system, because what we're facing today is the crisis, and this housing crisis. If I could just have 1 second on that. We face the housing crisis once again because it's price fixing. They're fixing the prices of these mortgages too high, and this is why nobody will buy them. This is why you have to get rid of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, sell all of that into the marketplace. And the reason they do this is to prop up the banks, because the banks have invested in Europe, they've invested in the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and these credit default swaps. They're in big trouble, and that is why they're getting bailed out, and that's why they're not allowing these mortgages to go down, and that is why we will most likely bail out Europe, which will be a real tragedy.
Congressman, thank you for that. It's time for a quick break.
Hold it. John, I wanted to give them 15 seconds each to solve the deficit problem.
We'll come back to the deficit.
When we return, balancing the budget, cutting the deficit, making the college education more affordable.
Plus, a little lesson on Social Security. You're watching CNBC's Your Money, Your Vote, Republican presidential debate.
Keep the conversation going. We want to hear your voice. Head to CNBC.com and join the discussion. What you share could end up on our debate ticker.
Social Security works as an immediate transfer of money from workers today to retirees today. And that works out just fine when enough money is being taken out of the paychecks of enough people to cover the checks going to retirees. But by 2014, aging baby boomers create a problem. Too many retirees will need checks, and not enough workers will be there to cover them. In the 1950s, there were 9 workers for every 1 retiree. By the mid-'60s, it was 4-1. Today, it's about 3-1. And by 2030, it'll be only 2-1. Throughout most of its history, Social Security has been running a surplus, with extra cash going into the Social Security Trust Fund, accumulating over $2.6 trillion. But since the beginning of the program, Uncle Sam has been helping himself to that cash and spending it like it was his own money, while he filled the jar with IOUs. So in 2014, when more retirees need checks than ever before, the only place to get them will be from a guy who is already deeply in debt, or by cutting benefits or raising taxes.
Next, we tackle the issues of Social Security, a spiraling deficit, and so much more. When your money, your vote, the Republican presidential debate continues in 90 seconds.
And welcome back. Joining us for this portion of the debate, Rick Santelli, CNBC's on-air editor, and Sharon Epperson, our personal finance correspondent. Now, we'll get to them in a moment, but first, Senator Santorum, you were known as a tough partisan fighter in the Senate. But look where partisan fighting got us this summer. Gridlock and a debt rating downgrade. The American people don't much like it, and neither does Doug Oberhelman, the CEO of Caterpillar. Let's take a listen.
Most people think our politicians are not helping the country get back on its feet. The last two presidents made promises to work across party lines, and both failed. How will you put our country ahead of your political party and solve the issues that are so critical for Americans? Be specific, please. These are promises.
And, Senator, let me ask you about, to set up that question, if everyone on this stage rules out any tax increases, even at a 10-to-1 ratio of spending cuts, as you have done, what could you possibly offer Democrats to get them to go along and compromise with you on the things that Republicans want?
You create a platform that they can buy into because they see the advantages of your plan. For example, one of the reasons that I've put forward this manufacturing plan is because folks here in Michigan, Democrats and Republicans, will vote for it. I was at the New Hampshire House of Representatives the other day and spoke to a bipartisan group, talked about the tax plan, not just the manufacturing, but the broad-based plan that I have. And I had two Democratic House members go over to my chairman, Dan Tamburello, and said, hey, I want him to come to my district and talk about this. We can support it. So when you put together a plan, look, if the Republican Party is just about keeping the top rate lower or cutting taxes, we're not going to be reaching people. We've got to look at plans that bring people together. That's why I focused on this sector. I understand, John, that the Wall Street Journal won't like that I'm picking one sector over another. I don't care. What I need to do is bring America together, find a plan that can work, that we can be implemented right away. It may not be the boldest plan in the world, but it's one that will work. It'll put people back to work. It'll give the ability of people to rise in our society. It'll help put jobs out in rural America where the manufacturing loss has been the greatest and the employment rate is the highest. You put a plan like that together, you'll get Democrats and Republicans, and we'll create jobs in this country and we'll get things done.
Governor Romney, you've shown that you can work with Democrats. When you were governor, of course, you collaborated with Ted Kennedy on the health care plan that you enacted. You raised fees to balance the budget, and you used that as an argument to get the credit rating of your state upgraded. Independent voters might like that. Should Republican primary voters be nervous about it?
Thanks for reminding everybody. What I've found is, in a state like mine, where there are a few Democrats in the legislature, 85% of my legislature was Democrat. To get anything done, I was always in an away game, if you will. And to get something done, I had to see if there were Democrats who cared more about the state than they cared about their reelection of their party. And there were. And right now, America faces a crisis. I think people on both sides of the aisle recognize that this is no longer a time just for worrying about the next election. This is a time to worry about America. We see what's happening in Italy, what's happening in Greece. That's where we're headed if we don't change our course. And there are enough good Democrats and good Republicans willing to put aside partisanship and do what's right for the country, in my view, if they're led by someone who cares more about the country, cares more about the future of America, cares about our kids and our grandkids, and is willing to step forward and lead. What we have now is a president who, unfortunately, is driven by one thing, his reelection. It's unbelievable that we have the crisis going on in America we have, And we have a president who's focused on trying to get himself reelected. This is a crisis in America.
Time, Governor. Governor Perry, you play only home games in Texas. Do you give him points for winning on the road?
Listen, there is a reason that Caterpillar moved their hydraulics manufacturing and their engine manufacturing to the state of Texas. It didn't have anything to do with Republican versus Democrat. It had everything to do with creating a climate in our state where the job creators knew that they were going to have the opportunity to keep more of what they work for. And that's what Americans are looking for. They're looking for a tax plan that basically says you're going to be able to keep more of what you work for. They're looking for a regulatory climate that doesn't strangle the life out of their businesses when they want to put those dollars out there to create the wealth. That's what Americans are looking for. I think we're getting all tangled up around an issue here about can you work with Democrats or can you work with Republicans? Yeah, we can all do that. But the fact of the matter is we better have a plan in place that Americans can get their hands around, and that's the reason my flat tax is the only one of all the folks, these good folks on the stage. It balances the budget in 2020. It does the things to the regulatory climate that has to happen. And I will tell you, it's 3 agencies of government when I get there that are gone. Commerce, education, and the, what's the third one there? Let's see.
You need 5.
Oh, 5. Okay. So commerce, education, and the
EPA?
EPA. There you go. No, okay.
Let's talk deposition.
Seriously? Is EPA the one you were talking about? Or?
No, sir. No, sir. We were talking about the agencies of government. EPA needs to be rebuilt. There's no doubt about that.
But you can't name the third one?
The third agency of government, yeah. I would do away with the education, the commerce, and let's see. I can't. The third one I can't. Sorry. Oops.
What about the EPA and the new rules coming out of the EPA? Mr. Cain, right now there is a situation with the EPA getting aggressive, the National Labor Relations Board getting aggressive, wanting to shut down a plant in South Carolina. What would you tell Boeing to do? Should they shut down that plant in South Carolina unless they make it union?
Absolutely not. That's what's wrong with government tampering. Absolutely not. The government has no business trying to pick winners and losers, as we have said, whether it's through the front door with legislation or the back door through regulation. Now, if I may...
What about manufacturing? Zero tax rate for one sector of the economy.
Well, this is why my 999 plan makes every sector grow. How about helping everybody, not just one sector? And that's the power of my 999 plan. Number one, it's bold. And yes, I'm the only one that's put a bold plan on the table and not afraid to go out and defend it. Now, as far as getting both sides of the aisle to work together, if I may, I don't see that little yellow light yet. In terms of getting both sides to work together, it's called provide a compelling solution, and the American people, if they understand it, they will demand it. That's how you get both sides of the aisle to work together.
Rick Santelli.
Speaker Gingrich, for the first time in its 75-year history, Social Security is going to be in the red. According to the Washington Post on October 29th, $105 billion this year. The reason? Political parties, both sides, the end of last year agreed that they wanted a tax cut. And the area they cut were payroll taxes, the main funding for Social Security. If we continue that, and there seems to be some agreement on both sides of the aisle to extend that tax cut, for 2011 and 2012, the cumulative amount will be closer to $260 billion. Are all tax cuts created equal? Is this a tax cut that you would back?
Well, I'm not prepared to raise taxes on working Americans in the middle of a recession that's this bad. But let me put Social Security in context. In 1968, in order to fake a balanced budget, Lyndon Johnson brought Social Security into the general budget. And ever since, politicians have hid behind Social Security. Now it's going to become a disadvantage to do so. I think the first step is you take Social Security off the federal budget. You don't try to solve the budget deficit problem on the back of working Americans and retirees. You deal with Social Security as a freestanding issue. And the fact is, if you allow younger Americans to have the choice to go to a Galveston or Chilean-style personal Social Security savings account, the long-term effect on Social Security is scored by the Social Security actuary as absolutely stabilizing the system and taking care of it. The